What's up guys, today we're going to take a look at the Hasbro Marvel Legends 20 years anniversary Iron Man action figure. Now this figure comes on a retro card back. It's a clear homage to the Toy Biz Marvel Legends series. There's a textured blue backdrop, and on the side of the card you can see the various symbols of the Marvel superheroes. Even on the front of the bubble, there are these circular callouts just for certain features of the action figure. And of course there's the iconic Toy Biz Marvel Legends logo on the front. On the back of the card, we see the product image of the figure. It's also packaged with a backdrop, description of the Marvel Legends series, and finally some more product information at the bottom. So now let's get this figure open. To unbox the figure, I simply slice the bubble as close to the back of the card as possible, and that way I can keep that card easily. Out of the box, the figure comes with a two-sided backdrop with an iconic cover on the front and then the Stark Tower sign at the back. The figure's on the plastic tray with one unhelmeted interchangeable hit, two fists, two blast effects, two smoke effects, and as well as a black Marvel Legends action figure stand just behind that Marvel Legends logo. Looking at his blast effects, they are cast in a light blue transparent plastic. There's a little bit of subtle shading that's applied with some digital printing. The white shading is just applied on one side of the blast effect, which is a bit peculiar. You can also pull off the bottom section of the blast effect if you don't want it. He also comes with two smoke effects. These are cast in a translucent black plastic, and the light goes through it quite well. The blast and smoke effects are a complete reuse from the effect parts that came with Ironheart Riri Williams. Iron Man comes with two repulsor hands by default, so you can plug those blast effects and twirl the smoke effects around that blast effect like so. Or alternatively, you could also twirl those smoke effects around his wrist first, and then it goes around that blast effect. The blast and smoke effects also work the same way with the peg holes on the bottom of his feet. So you can have him blasting off and flying into action. The smoke effects also work the same way. You can either have them starting to twirl around the blast effects, or even have them twirl around his ankle first. Next, he comes with two interchangeable clenched fists. These are cast in a dark red plastic and given that black wash just to bring out all that line detail in the sculpting. The line sculpting is even present on that hinge disc. However, it is not actually given that black wash just to bring out those details. These fists articulate inwards as well as outwards. And of course, these fists pop easily onto Iron Man as well. And finally, he also comes with an alternate unhelmeted hit. This is definitely a retro-looking Tony Stark. The hairpiece is cast in a separate black plastic, and it's got an old-fashioned side parting. It even has a little bit of sideburns. The hairstyle goes over his ears, and there's also a blue wash on top of it, just to bring out all that texture and the flow of his hair. Coming back to the front of his face, there's also great sculpting work over here. You can see the subtle lines on his forehead as well as the wrinkles on the sides of his eyes. All the paint on his face is digitally applied, so that means really sharp and precise applications for his eyebrows, eyes, mustache, as well as his teeth and lips. So there's really great work over here. What we end up having is really a retro-looking Tony Stark with a cocky grin on his face. However, I do recognize that his expression could come across as a little creepy as well. And of course, the unhelmeted hit pops on nicely onto his body. However, it does look like it sits a little high on his neck, and that makes his neck look a little too long, and that hit sits just slightly awkwardly on his bulky armored body. And finally, he comes with a black plastic action figure stand. It's got the Toy Biz Marvel Legends logo sculpted on it, two peg holes that go into his feet, and a rail over here for you to slide that backdrop into it. And now you can pose Iron Man on this action figure stand, making it look pretty premium on your shelf, together with all the blast effects and that helmeted hit. Now onto the sculpt of the figure itself. There's actually quite a number of newly sculpted parts. That would be his head, his torso, as well as his crotch piece. His arms and his legs are all reused from the 80 years anniversary Iron Man over here on the right. There's also contrasting colors on the new Iron Man. The reds and yellows on this figure are bright but also flat, compared to the metallic tones of the reds as well as the gold over here on the 80 years Iron Man. And this one is more based on the Alex Ross kind of artwork. He's given that horned helmet head sculpt. The base of the head is cast in a red plastic, and then there's also some black plastic inserts with the yellow plastic overlay for the front of the helmet. The slots for the eyes as well as his mouthpiece are all really sharply cut into that yellow piece of plastic in order to bring out the black color from below. Onto the sides of his head, he's got a sculpted earpiece as well, and we also see lines that are sculpted all the way to the top of his head. These lines are also given a black wash in order to bring those details out. That line detail is also present on his neck, also given that black wash to bring out that sculpted details. So I really like that head sculpt because it looks simple, well executed, and also iconic to his really retro look. Now moving on to his torso, you can see that it has actually less defined muscle sculpting compared to the 80 years Iron Man. There are 3 separate attachments to his top of his chest, with yellow paint on the inside of the top 2, and the arc reactor has a really sharply applied tempo. The rims for the sides of his chest armor are less pronounced compared to the 80 years Iron Man, so his torso armor really just looks like a simplified comic art style. I can't say I'm a fan of this because it looks like it lacks a little bit of detail. His crotch piece now also has a more simplified buckle design, but the black wash does help to bring out the sculpted detail for the lines in his crotch piece. And moving on to his arms, they're the same sculpted parts as the 80 years Iron Man, however this time they are using a more brighter, vibrant shade of yellow for the plastic. While it looks accurate to the comics, it ends up looking pretty lackluster and flat, and the plain yellow plastic just looks a little cheap. Onto his gauntlets as well as his hands, they are cast using a red plastic, once again with also that black paint to bring out the line detail. The wash treatment looks a little inconsistent when you compare his hands to his wrist gauntlets, so the colors look a little mismatched. And once again, those repulsor hands are also cast without any articulation in the wrist, so these repulsor hands are perpetually stuck in this pose. And that's quite disappointing for a special edition figure that we are paying much more for. Moving to the back of the figure, once again more subtle muscle sculpting on the back, and the black line detail on his butt as well to bring out the sculpted details. And I also noticed that this time he's actually missing those 2 attachments at the side of his waist, once again for a more streamlined and simple comic look. Moving on to his legs, it's once again that unpainted bright yellow plastic, and I have that same issue with the arms because the plastic looks cheap, but at the same time I do like how they've treated the boots as well, giving a black wash to bring out the line detail that was already sculpted and what you've seen on the 80 years Iron Man. And the wash also goes all the way around to the back of the boots as well, so that's good work. For articulation, his head is on a ball hinge, so it does go 360. There's a little bit of sideways tilt. He can look down that far and also up quite a fair bit, and that's useful for flight poses. Swivel hinge at the shoulder, so they go 360 as well as coming out pretty far. Upper bicep swivel for 360 swivel. Double hinged at the elbows for more than 90 degrees range. Just a swivel at the wrist so it goes 360, and no hinge so that repulsor hand is just stuck. Mid-torso hinge for ab crunch forward as well as backward. Swivel in the waist for 360 spin. Ball jointed hips that go out pretty far. No problems forward and backward. Thigh swivel for 360 spin. Double jointed knees that get you a good range. A swivel just above the boot for a calf swivel for 360. Ankle tilt upwards as well as downwards, and this joint is pretty stiff. And finally ankle pivot outwards as well as inwards. If you already have the 80 years Iron Man, you will be more than familiar with his scheme of articulation, and so you should be able to get him into most iconic Iron Man repulsor blasting poses. So here we have a couple of head swaps. I do feel a little disappointed that this Iron Man didn't come with his iconic more rounded helmet design in the red and yellow comic colors. I would also definitely want this head sculpt in the metallic red and gold in order to match the 80 years Iron Man. The helmeted head sculpt with the nose does also fit onto this new Iron Man, while his retro style head also fits onto the 80 years Iron Man. It's interesting that this head actually sits just fine on this neck, which makes me think that this neck is probably sculpted just a little too long. The 80 years unhelmeted head sculpt also pops on just fine, however once again you can see just how exaggerated of a long neck he has. With so many Tony Stark unhelmeted head sculpts, you can also borrow this one from this more modern looking Iron Man, but it looks a little undersized for this body. You can also borrow that unhelmeted head sculpt from the Gameverse Iron Man, but this time it also looks just a little undersized. And finally, if you want repulsor hands that have a wrist hinge, you can borrow those from the Modular Armor Iron Man. However, these hands do not have that black wash on them, and the plastic is a little metallic red, so there might be a little bit of mismatch. The 20 years anniversary Iron Man stands at 6 5/8 of an inch, and that's just under 17 centimeters. Here he is compared with a couple of Iron Man armors. Here he is with Cap and Black Widow. Here he is with Thor and Hulk, Spider-Man and Doctor Strange, War Machine and Julia Carpenter's Spider-Woman, Red Skull and Ultron, Doctor Doom and Baron Zemo, and a couple of Iron Man baddies. Here he is with G.I. Joe Classified Series and Star Wars Black Series. The head sculpts on this Iron Man are truly great work, but it's let down by a couple of things, particularly when you consider that this figure is coming in at a higher price point. First, the neck is sculpted too long, and the oversimplified torso unfortunately makes the figure look cheap, especially when you match it with bright comic colors. Next, at this price point, he should have come with the rounded helmet head sculpt that is trademark Iron Man, and also have some new accessories instead of lazy reused blast effects. This Iron Man is a tough sell, and I cannot recommend it to you. The 80 years Iron Man still firmly remains the definitive Iron Man for my collection. Please like and share this video, let me know what you think in the comments below, and subscribe to my channel for more toy reviews. Thanks for watching, take care and stay safe.